Welcome to the House of Stories, the channel dedicated to rigorous analysis and the dissemination of the past. On this occasion, we focus on the figure of Thutmose III, one of the most outstanding pharaohs of ancient Egypt, whose reign marked a period of great expansion and political consolidation. We will examine the complex dynamics of his relationship with Hatshepsut and the processes of destruction and preservation of his memory. We will also address the discovery of his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a funerary space full of religious and artistic symbolism. Through archaeological sources and historical texts, we will reconstruct the life and legacy of this monarch. We will also analyze the characteristics of his mummy, discovered in the 19th century, and the circumstances surrounding its preservation and restoration. We will reflect on the historical context of the 18th and 19th dynasties, and the meaning of the funerary rituals depicted in his tomb. The interpretation of the inscriptions and decorations representing his struggle against chaos and his quest for immortality will be explored. Finally, we will understand how his figure has been the subject of study and respect throughout time, up to his recent transfer to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. We invite you to delve with us into the history of one of the great pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Let us begin. The Warrior Pharaoh. Thutmose III, frequently known as Thutmose the Great, was the fifth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, and reigned approximately between the years 1479 and 1425 before Christ. He is considered one of the most brilliant military strategists and commanders of all time and is remembered as the warrior pharaoh par excellence of the Egyptian New Kingdom, as well as a dominant figure of his era. Officially, he ascended the throne on the 28th of April, in the year 1479 before Christ, when he was barely 2 years old. However, during the first 22 years of his reign, he ruled as co-regent alongside his stepmother and aunt, the famous female pharaoh Hatshepsut, who fully assumed the title and functions of pharaoh. Thutmose III assumed absolute power after the death of Hatshepsut in the year 1458 before Christ. Throughout his government he led between 17 and 20 military campaigns, all victorious, which brought the Egyptian empire to its greatest territorial expansion. These feats were recorded in the famous Annals of Thutmose III, inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Amun at Karnak. In addition, he is credited with creating the first organized naval fleet of antiquity, a key innovation in Egyptian military power. Thanks to his tactical genius, historian Richard A. Gabriel has called him the Napoleon of Egypt. Names and family lineage. Thutmose III was officially known by two main names transliterated as Menkaper and Jehuti Mez. The first, Menkaper, translates as established is the manifestation of Ra, referring to his divine connection with the solar god Ra. The second name, Thutmose or Thutmosis, means born of Thoth or Thoth has born, alluding to the god of wisdom, writing and magic, Thoth. The Egyptian historian Manetho, in his work Egyptiaca, originally written in Greek and later paraphrased by Eusebius of Caesarea, referred to him by the Greek names Mithras and Misphragnathosis. Thutmose III was the son of Pharaoh Thutmose II and a secondary wife named Iset. The great royal wife of his father was Hatshepsut, who was also Thutmose's aunt and stepmother. Her daughter, Neferura, was the half-sister of the young pharaoh. After the death of Thutmose II, Thutmose III was still too young to rule. Consequently, Hatshepsut assumed the role of regent, and later proclaimed herself pharaoh, without ever formally denying Thutmose's right to the throne. During this period she ruled Egypt de facto, leading the kingdom into an era of great prosperity and stability. In the surviving monuments, Thutmose appears depicted as the senior ruler, but both he and Hatshepsut held the usual royal names and symbols, without an explicit hierarchy being established between them. Marriages and succession. When Thutmose reached the appropriate age and demonstrated his capability, Hatshepsut appointed him commander of her armies. Upon her death, in the year 1458 before Christ, he was already fully prepared to govern on his own. Some Egyptologists have speculated about the possibility that Thutmose married his half-sister Neferura, although there is no conclusive evidence. It is possible that she was the mother of his firstborn son, Amenemhat. although it is also considered that the mother might have been Sadia, who held the title of Great Royal Wife. Prince Amenemhat died before his father. Historical records that have come down to us mention several other wives of Thutmose III. It is known that he had at least 3 foreign wives, Menhet, Menwi, and Merti, who were buried together. There is also evidence of another wife named Nebtu, known from a column in the pharaoh's tomb. After the death of Sataya, a woman named Meritra Hatshepsut assumed the role of Great Royal Wife. She was the mother of several of Thutmose's children, among them the future pharaoh Amenhotep II, another son named Menkaperre, and at least 4 daughters, Nebetiune, Meritaman C, Meritaman D, and Iset. Chronology and reign duration. Thutmose III reigned from the year 1479 before Christ until the year 1425 before Christ, according to the low chronology of ancient Egypt. This has been the conventional Egyptian chronology in academic circles since the 1960s. However, in some areas, the high chronology is still preferred, which places his reign between the years 1504 before Christ and 1450 before Christ. These dates, like all those corresponding to the 18th dynasty, remain subject to debate due to uncertainty related to the astronomical observation of the heliacal rising of the star Sothis, recorded during the reign of Amenhotep I. A papyrus from that time records this astronomical observation, which in theory could be used to precisely correlate Egyptian chronology with the modern calendar. However, to achieve that exact correlation, it is also necessary to know the geographic latitude where the observation was made. Since the document does not specify the place where it took place, it is safely assumed that it occurred in a city in the Nile Delta, such as Memphis or Heliopolis, or else in Thebes. Depending on which of these locations is considered, a difference of 20 years arises between the two chronologies, generating the discrepancy between the high and low chronology. Year 54. The exact length of Thutmose III's reign is known to the day thanks to findings discovered in the tomb of the military commander Amenemhat Mahu. This faithful servant recorded the death of the pharaoh in the 54th year of his reign, specifically on the 30th day of the 3rd month of the Perit season. It is known that the day of Thutmose III's ascension to the throne was the 4th day of the 1st month of the Shemu season. Based on this information, and using astronomical observations, it has been possible to establish with precision, assuming the low chronology, the exact dates of the beginning and end of his reign. From the 28th of April in the year 1479 before Christ, until the 11th of March in the year 1425 before Christ respectively. Military campaigns. Thutmose III carried out at least 16 military campaigns over a period of 20 years. The American Egyptologist James Breasted nicknamed him the Napoleon of Egypt, referring to his conquering drive and remarkable territorial expansion. During his reign he is credited with the conquest of 350 cities extending Egyptian dominion throughout much of the Near East, from the Euphrates River to Nubia. He was the first pharaoh after Thutmose I to cross the Euphrates, a feat he achieved during his campaign against the kingdom of Matani. The records of these campaigns were carved on the walls of the Temple of Amun at Karnak, in inscriptions that have been transcribed in the Urkundan Vir, Documents 4. Thanks to these achievements he transformed Egypt into a genuine international superpower, establishing an empire that stretched from the Asian regions of Syria in the north to Upper Nubia in the south. Much of what is known about him as a warrior and sovereign comes from the writings of his royal scribe and army commander, Thanui. One key factor in his military successes was technological innovation in warfare. The Hyksos had introduced around the year 1650 before Christ advanced weapons such as horse-drawn chariots, technology which the Egyptians adopted and perfected during their expulsion of the Hyksos. During his campaigns, Thutmose III encountered little resistance from neighboring kingdoms, which greatly facilitated the expansion of his empire. It has even been documented that his army was capable of transporting boats over land, a surprising logistical feat for the time. First campaign, the Battle of Megiddo. After the death of Hatshepsut, which occurred on the 10th day of the 6th month of the 21st year of Thutmose III's reign, according to a stela found in Armant, the king of Kadesh mobilized his army toward the strategic city of Megiddo. Facing this threat, Thutmose III gathered his troops and departed from Egypt, crossing the frontier fortress of Charu on the 25th day of the 8th month. His army advanced along the coastal plain to Jamnia, then diverted inland to reach Yehem, a small city near Megiddo, around the middle of the 9th month of that same year. The subsequent Battle of Megiddo was probably the most significant of the 17 campaigns carried out by the pharaoh. Between Thutmose and his objective lay a mountain range branching off from Mount Carmel, offering 3 possible attack routes. His generals considered the northern and southern routes safer as they circled the massif, but Thutmose III, as he proudly recounted in an inscription, called them cowards and chose the most dangerous path, the narrow mountain pass of Aruna. According to his own words, the trail was so narrow that only horse after horse and man after man could advance. Although the pass does exist, it is not as narrow as the pharaoh described. Nevertheless, his choice was strategic. The Egyptian army emerged on the plain of Esdraelon, brilliantly cutting off the retreat of the Canaanite forces and isolating the city of Megiddo. Victory and Siege. According to the annals of Thutmose III in the Temple of Amun at Karnak, the battle took place in the 23rd year, on the 21st day of the 1st month of Shemu, which coincided with the New Moon Festival. This date corresponds to the 9th of May in the year 1457 before Christ, assuming his accession in the year 1479 before Christ. In the combat, Thutmose III decisively defeated the Canaanite forces, although many of his enemies managed to flee to the city during the sack carried out by the Egyptian troops. This forced the pharaoh to initiate a siege that lasted 7 or 8 months, until Megiddo surrendered. The exact size of the armies involved is uncertain, but most specialists agree that the Egyptian contingent was larger. Historian Donald Redford estimated that both armies numbered around 10,000 men, based on the time it took to cross the pass and the number of sheep and goats captured after the battle. This campaign marked a political turning point in the ancient Near East. With the capture of Megiddo, Thutmose III secured total control of northern Canaan, forcing Syrian princes to send tributes and noble hostages to Egypt. Beyond the Euphrates, even the kings of Assyria, Babylonia and the Hittites recognized his hegemony, and sent him gifts which he, in the inscriptions at Karnak, presented as tribute. The only power that did not submit was Matani, which would later suffer the impact of Egyptian campaigns in Western Asia. Campaigns 2-4. Tours through Canaan and Syria. The second, third, and fourth campaigns of Thutmose III seem to have been more like diplomatic tours through Syria and Canaan, aimed at collecting tributes. Traditionally, the material immediately following the text of the first campaign has been considered part of the second campaign. This text records tributes coming from the region the Egyptians called Ret Jenu, roughly equivalent to Canaan, and also mentions a second tribute paid by Assyria to Thutmose III. However, it is likely that these texts correspond to the 40th year or later of Thutmose III's reign, and therefore have no relation to any second military campaign. If so, no record has been found of this supposed second campaign. Thutmose's third campaign was not considered important enough to be included in the extensive annals of Karnak. However, an inventory of animals and plants found in Canaan was made, depicted on the walls of a special hall in Karnak. This activity is dated to the 25th year of the pharaoh's reign. There is no record documenting the fourth campaign, but it is known that at some point during this period a fortress was built in Lower Lebanon, and wood was cut for the construction of a ceremonial boat, which fits better within this time frame. Campaigns 5-7 Conquest of Syria. The 5th, 6th, and 7th campaigns of Thutmose III were directed against the Phoenician cities in Syria and against Kadesh, located on the Euphrates River. In the 29th year of his reign, he began his 5th campaign, in which he first took a city whose name has been lost due to a fragmentary text, which had been garrisoned by Tunip. He then advanced inland and captured the city and territory around Ardata. The city was sacked and its wheat fields burned. Unlike previous raiding incursions, Thutmose III established a garrison in Jahi, a name probably referring to southern Syria. This allowed him to transport supplies and troops between Syria and Egypt. Some experts suggest that the 6th campaign in the 30th year began with a naval transport of troops directly to Byblos, bypassing Canaan. After his troops arrived in Syria, they advanced northward along the Jordan River Valley, plundering the lands of Kadesh. Then turning west again, Thutmose took Samarra and suppressed a rebellion in Ardata, which apparently had risen once more. To prevent further rebellions, Thutmose III began taking hostages from the Syrian cities. The politics of these cities were driven by their nobles, aligned with Matani and generally consisting of a king and a small group of foreign warriors called Marianu. Thutmose discovered that taking hostages from these noble families largely ensured their loyalty. In the 31st year, Syria rebelled again, so Thutmose launched his 7th campaign, taking the port city of Ulaza and other small Phoenician ports, imposing even stricter measures to prevent future rebellions. Moreover, by removing grain reserves from Syria and transferring them to the newly conquered ports to supply his troops and administrators, he left the Syrian cities hungry and without resources to finance new rebellions. Campaign 8, Attack on Matani. After Thutmose III took control of the Syrian cities, the obvious target for his 8th campaign was the state of Matani, a Hurrian country with an Indo-Aryan ruling class. However, to reach Matani, he had to cross the Euphrates River. He sailed directly to Byblos and built boats that he transported overland. What seemed like just another tour through Syria involved the usual raids as he moved north through the lands he had already conquered. He continued north, passing through the territories of the still unconquered cities of Aleppo and Carchemish, and quickly crossed the Euphrates on his boats, taking the king of Matani completely by surprise. It seems that Matani did not expect an invasion and therefore did not have an army ready to defend against Thutmose, although their boats on the Euphrates tried to prevent the Egyptian crossing. Thutmose III advanced freely from city to city, looting them, while the nobles hid in caves, or at least so record the Egyptian chronicles, which often have a propagandistic character. During this period without opposition, Thutmose erected a second commemorative stele for his crossing of the Euphrates, right next to the stele that his grandfather, Thutmose I, had erected several decades earlier. A militia was raised to fight the invaders but performed very poorly. Thutmose III then returned to Syria, passing through Ni, where he recorded participating in an elephant hunt. He collected tributes from foreign powers and returned to Egypt victorious. Campaigns 9 to 16. Campaigns through Syria. Thutmose III went back to Syria for his 9th campaign in the 34th year of his rule, though this seems to have just been a quick raid into the area called Nukashi, where semi-nomadic people lived. The things they took were very few, so it was probably a small and unimportant raid. The records from the 10th campaign show a much tougher fight. By the king's 35th year, the ruler of Matani had gathered a big army and faced the Egyptians near Aleppo. As was common for Egyptian kings, Thutmose bragged about a huge victory, though this claim is doubtful because of how little stuff they got. Thutmose's stories at Karnak say he only captured 10 prisoners of war, which suggests that the fight with the Matani might have ended in a tie. However, the fact that after this campaign he received gifts from the Hittites seems to show that the outcome was somewhat in Thutmose's favor. We don't know the details of the 11th and 12th campaigns. We think the 11th one happened in the 36th year of his rule, and the 12th in the 37th. That's because the 13th campaign is written down at Karnak as happening in the 38th year. Part of the list of things brought back from the 12th campaign is still there, right before the 13th one starts. What was on that list, mostly big animals and minerals we can't quite identify, might mean this campaign happened in the Nukashi steppes, but that's just a guess. In the 38th year, Thutmose did his 13th military campaign, going back to Nuhasa for a small operation. The 14th campaign in the 39th year was against the Shasu. It's impossible to know exactly where they were because they were nomads. They could have lived anywhere from Lebanon to Transjordan or Edom. After this campaign, the numbers the scribes of Thutmose gave to the campaigns get lost in incomplete pieces, so we can only count the campaigns by their dates. In the 40th year, tribute was collected from foreign powers, but it's not known if this was formally considered a military campaign, meaning if the king participated or if an officer led it. Only the tribute list from the next campaign survives, from which we can only guess that it was probably another raid into the border areas around Ni. The last Asian campaign is better documented. Sometime before the 42nd year, Matani apparently started stirring up trouble in all the major Syrian cities. Thutmose moved his troops by land, following the coastal route, and put down the rebellions in the Arka plain, called Arkantu in Thutmose's records. Then he moved on to Tunip. After taking Tunip, he focused on Kadesh again. There he attacked and destroyed 3 nearby Matani garrisons and returned victorious to Egypt. However, this victory wasn't complete or lasting, as he failed to take Kadesh, and it's very likely that Tunip didn't stay allied with Egypt after Thutmose's death. Still, this victory must have made a big impact, because later tribute lists include the city of Adana, in Cilicia. Campaign 17, the expedition to Nubia. In the 50th year of his rule, Thutmose III started his last big military trip, heading south, towards Nubia. His army went all the way to the 4th cataract of the Nile River. This was a really big deal because no pharaoh before him had ever gone that far into this area with an army. But this campaign wasn't just about winning a fight. It also kept up the spreading of Egyptian culture and power that earlier Egyptian kings had started in Nubia. Egyptian influence had already been strong in the area for many years. We know this because the oldest Egyptian paper found in Gebel Barkal, which was a very important religious and political spot in Nubia, is from 3 years before Thutmose III's campaign. This shows that Egyptian presence and culture had really taken root in these lands. This campaign, even though it was the last of Thutmose III's military trips, made Egypt's influence over Nubia even stronger. It also set things up for the pharaohs who came after him to keep control over this important southern area. Monuments and artistic developments under Thutmose III. Thutmose III was a great builder. He built more than 50 temples during his time as king, even though many are now gone and we only know about them from old writings. Also, he pushed for the building of many tombs for important people. These tombs were made with amazing quality and detail, better than anything seen before in Egyptian history. His time as king brought a big change in how statues, paintings, and carvings looked. It continued and even made better the new ideas that started when Hatshepsut was queen. Artistic and architectural innovations. For most of his rule, Thutmose III's builders and artists stuck to the old ways of Egyptian carvings. But starting in the 42nd year of his rule, the pharaoh started showing himself wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt and dressed in the Sindit-style kilt, a look never seen before. When it came to buildings, he brought in a new way of using pillars. He built the only known set of heraldic pillars in Egypt, 2 huge columns that stood alone, not as part of a porch or roof. His Jubilee Hall is thought to be the first known building made in the basilica style, with rows of columns holding up the roof and the 2 middle rows taller to let light in through windows. The artists of his time reached new heights of skill in painting. In fact, the tombs from his reign were the first to be fully painted, leaving behind the old way of painted carvings. They also learned and used advanced glass-making tricks, most likely developed during the 18th dynasty, to make pots using the core-formed method. Thutmose III and the Temple of Karnak. Thutmose III put a lot more effort and money into Karnak than anywhere else. In the main temple, called Iput Isut, he rebuilt the hypostyle hall that belonged to his grandfather, Thutmose I. He took apart the red chapel built by Hatshepsut and put up the 6th pylon in its place. This was a special room for the sacred boat of Amun, with a hallway in front of it. The roof of this hallway was held up by his special pillars with symbols on them. Also, he built a sacred wall around the main sanctuary, which had small chapels, workshops, and storage rooms inside. To the east of the main sanctuary, he built the Jubilee Hall to celebrate the said festival. This hall was built like a church, with columns on both sides and windows higher up. The different heights of the columns made these windows possible. In 2 small rooms of this temple there are carvings that show a detailed list of plants and animals from Canaan. These were brought back from his 3rd military trip. To the east of Iput Isut, he built another temple for Aten, where he is shown being supported by Amun. In this temple, the famous Tekken Wadi, or unique obelisk, was planned. It was meant to be the tallest obelisk ever carved, and was supposed to stand alone, not with a partner. However, this obelisk wasn't put up until Thutmose IV's rule, 35 years later. It was later moved to Rome by Emperor Constantius II, and is now known as the Lateran Obelisk. During Roman times in the year 390 AD, Emperor Theodosius I put up another obelisk from the Karnak temple in the Hippodrome of Constantinople. This is now known as the Obelisk of Theodosius. Work south of the main temple. To the south of the central temple, between the sanctuary of Amun and the temple of Mut, Thutmose III undertook further constructions. He erected the 7th pylon on the north-south causeway leading to the temple, located between the 4th and 5th pylons. This pylon was used during the Jubilee celebration and was decorated with scenes of defeated enemies. Flanking the pylon, he placed royal colossi and 2 obelisks in front of the entrance gate. While the base of the eastern obelisk remains in place, the western one was taken to the Hippodrome of Constantinople. Further south, he completed the 8th pylon, started by Hatshepsut. Next to the causeway, he excavated a sacred lake measuring 76 by 100 meters, where he placed a bark sanctuary made of alabaster. Finally, he ordered the royal artist to depict his extensive collections of fauna and flora in what is today known as the Botanical Garden of Thutmose III, a testament to the scientific and artistic interest of the era. Destruction of Hatshepsut's monuments. For many years, Egyptologists held the theory that, after the death of Thutmose II, his wife Hatshepsut usurped the throne from her stepson Thutmose III. Although the latter was co-regent, it was speculated that he never forgave his stepmother for having overshadowed him during his youth. It was believed that shortly after Hatshepsut's death, many of her monuments and depictions, including her famous necropolis at Deir el-Bahari, were vandalized or destroyed as a damnatio memoriae, a condemnation meant to erase her memory, driven by the vengeful anger of Thutmose III. However, recent research challenges this traditional interpretation. Studies by experts such as Charles Nims and Peter Dorman have shown that the earliest evidence of these destructions dates only to the 46th or 47th year of Thutmose III's reign, that is, toward the end of his rule, about 25 years after Hatshepsut's death. Furthermore, the monuments of Senenmut, Hatshepsut's chief steward, were also damaged, indicating that the motive went beyond a simple personal vendetta. It is known that Hatshepsut trusted Thutmose III to command her armies, and that he showed no interest in claiming the throne during her lifetime. In fact, he retained the religious and administrative leaders she had appointed, and built his own funerary temple right next to hers without apparent resentment. Currently, the intentional destruction of Hatshepsut's monuments is interpreted as a political maneuver to ensure a smooth transition of power to Amenhotep II, son of Thutmose III. Amenhotep II's position in the succession line was not strong enough to guarantee his ascent as pharaoh, so erasing Hatshepsut's memory could eliminate possible rivals with similar or superior claims. Amenhotep II even attributed to himself the construction of monuments that had previously been damaged. It is also believed that this campaign against Hatshepsut's memory could not be carried out until the death of powerful religious and administrative officials who had served both rulers, which delayed the action until well into the joint regency of Thutmose III and Amenhotep II. Death and burial. According to Peter der Manuelian, an inscription in the biography of the tomb of the official Amenemheb states that Thutmose III died in the 54th year. On the 30th day of the 3rd month of Pere, after having reigned over Egypt for 53 years, 10 months and 26 days. This means he passed away 1 month and 4 days before beginning his 54th year of reign. If the periods of co-regency with Hatshepsut and Amenhotep II are subtracted, Thutmose III ruled as sole pharaoh for a little more than 30 years. The tomb of Thutmose III, known as KV34, was discovered by Victor Loret in 1898 in the Valley of the Kings. Its layout is characteristic of tombs from the 18th dynasty, with a pronounced turn in the vestibule before the burial chamber. 2 staircases and 2 corridors provide access to the vestibule, which is preceded by a square shaft or vertical well. In the vestibule there is a complete version of the Amduat, an important funerary text of the New Kingdom, making this tomb the first where the entire text was found. The burial chamber, oval-shaped and supported by two pillars, has a ceiling decorated with stars, symbolizing the cave of the god Sokar. In the center rests a large quartzite sarcophagus, shaped like a cartouche. On the two central pillars are inscriptions taken from the Litany of Ra, which celebrate the late solar god, identified in this period with the pharaoh himself. On one of the pillars there is a unique image showing Thutmose III being suckled by the goddess Isis, represented as a tree. The wall decorations are simple and schematic, imitating the cursive script style of funerary papyri rather than the usual luxury of other royal tombs. The colors are discreet, with black figures on a cream background and some touches of red and pink. These paintings depict the pharaoh helping the gods defeat Apophis, the serpent of chaos, thereby ensuring the daily rebirth of the sun and at the same time, the pharaoh's own resurrection. Mummy of Thutmose III. The mummy of Thutmose III was discovered in the Deir el-Bahri cache, located above the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut in 1881. He was buried alongside other leaders of the 18th and 19th dynasties, such as Ahmose I, Amenhotep I, Thutmose I, Thutmose II, Ramesses I, Seti I, Ramesses II, and Ramesses IX, as well as the pharaohs of the 21st dynasty Pinjem I, Pinjem II, and Siamun. Although it is popularly believed that his mummy was first unwrapped by Gaston Maspero in 1886, in fact it was Emile Bruch, the Egyptologist responsible for evacuating the mummies from the Deir el-Bahri cache in 1881, who initially unwrapped it. This happened shortly after the mummy arrived at the Boulak Museum while Maspero was in France. The Director General of the Egyptian Antiquities Service ordered the mummy to be rewrapped. Therefore, when Maspero officially unwrapped it in 1886, he knew it was already in a quite deteriorated state. The mummy had suffered severe damage in antiquity at the hands of tomb robbers, and its bandages were later cut and torn by the Rasul family, who had rediscovered the tomb and its contents a few years earlier. Maspero's description of the body gives an idea of the severity of the damage. His mummy was not well protected, for towards the end of the 20th dynasty it was ripped from the coffin by robbers, who stripped it and stole the jewels covering it, causing wounds in their haste to take the loot. Subsequently, it was reburied and has remained intact until now, but before the new burial the bandages required restoration, and since parts of the body had loosened, the restorers, to give it the necessary firmness, compressed it between 4 wooden slats shaped like paddles, painted white, placing 3 inside the bandages and 1 outside, under the bands that held the funerary sheet. Regarding the face, which remained intact, Maspero commented, "Fortunately, the face, which had been covered with pitch during the mummification process, did not suffer damage from this rough treatment and appeared intact when the protective mask was removed. Its appearance does not correspond to our ideal of a conqueror. His statues, although not depicting him with masculine beauty, do show refined and intelligent features, but comparison with the mummy reveals that the artists idealized their model. The forehead is abnormally low, the eyes are deeply sunken, the jaw is heavy, the lips are thick, and the cheekbones are extremely prominent. The overall physiognomy resembles that of Thutmose II, though with greater energy." Maspero was so disheartened by the condition of the mummy, and the possibility that the others might be equally damaged, though it turned out that few were as deteriorated, that he did not unwrap any other mummy for several years. Unlike many other mummies from the Deir el-Bahri cache, the wooden coffin shaped like a mummy that contained the body was original to the pharaoh, although any gilding or decoration it had was destroyed in antiquity. The anatomist Grafton Elliott Smith estimated the height of Thutmose III's mummy at 1 meter and 65 centimeters, but since the mummy lacked feet, the pharaoh was undoubtedly taller. The mummy was displayed in the Royal Mummy Room of the Egyptian Antiquities Museum with catalog number CG 61068 until April 2021, when it was transferred to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, along with the mummies of 17 other kings and 4 queens in the parade known as the Golden Parade of the Pharaohs. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the fascinating history of Thutmose III, a pharaoh whose life and legacy continue to inspire admiration and debate among experts and enthusiasts alike. We hope this trip to the past has enriched your understanding of ancient Egypt and its complexities. Don't forget to subscribe to keep exploring together the mysteries and wonders of history.